Gender-based violence. Power, use of force and consent. To be reported by Group 1. Objectives. Identify the relationship between abuse of power and gender-based violence. Understand that the term violence in the context of gender-based violence means using some type of force, which may or may not include physical force. And understand the meaning of informed consent and its relationship to gender-based violence. What is gender-based violence? Gender-based violence is a phenomenon deeply rooted in gender inequality and continues to be one of the most notable human rights violations within all societies. Gender-based violence is the violence directed against a person because of their gender. Both women and men experience a gender-based violence, but the majority of victims are women and girls. Gender-based violence against women are terms that are often used interchangeably as it has been widely acknowledged that most gender-based violence is inflicted on women and girls by men. However, using the gender-based aspect is important as it highlights the fact that many forms of violence against women are rooted in power inequalities between women and men. The terms are used interchangeably throughout EG's work, reflecting the disproportionate number of these particular crimes against women. Forms of gender-based violence. Physical. It results in injuries, distress, health problems. Typical forms of physical violence are beating, strangling, pushing, and the use of weapons. In the EU, 31% of women have experienced one or more acts of physical since the age of 15. Ano siya ang manapat ng wag kagwanta sa imong pasensya, manumbag ka, mong tamparoson, physical violence. Sexual. It includes sexual acts, attempts to obtain a sexual acts to traffic, or acts otherwise directed against a person's sexuality without the person's consent. It's estimated that 1 in 20 women, 5% has been raped in EU countries since the age of 15. Mani ang pagpang-rape. Rape ka kayo kakagwanta sa imong sexual needs. Ano lang rape po, bisag dili ganahan ang babae or lalaki. But most of the time, babae gud ang rape. Psychological. It includes psychological abusive behaviors such as controlling, coercion, economic violence, and blackmail. 43% of women in the 28 EU countries have experienced some form of psychological by an intimate partner. Napon hindi apil po diri ang mga bullying, abusive act. Examples of gender-based violence. Domestic violence includes all acts of physical, sexual, psychological, and economic violence that occur within the family, domestic unit, or between intimate partners. This can be former or current spouses, also when they don't share the same residence. 22% of all women who have or had a partner have experienced physical and sexual violence by a partner since the age of 15. So, ubay gini, no? Sex-based harassment. Sex-based harassment includes unwelcome verbal, physical or other non-verbal conduct of a sexual nature with the purpose of effect or violating the dignity of a person. Between 45% to 55% of women in EU have experienced sexual harassment since the age of 15. Forced marriage refers to marriage concluded under force of or coercion, either physical pressure to marry or emotional and psychological pressure. It's closely linked it's closely linked to child or early marriage when children are with before reaching the minimum age of marriage. Muna siya ang type nga kaning sa Bisaya nga term pa is buya-buya, kanang ang ginikanan mo ay magbuot sa marriage sa ilang anak. Difference between power and power people. Power. Difference between power and powerful people. Power is the capacity of a person to influence others and alter their actions, beliefs, and behaviors. However, it's important to note that there is a difference between power versus influence. Authority is the legitimate power that a person or group is granted to practice over others within organization. Powerful is defined as the ability or potential of an individual to influence others and control their actions. Authority is the legal and formal right to give orders and commands and take decisions. Sa tuwa pa na yung term, ano yung mga dato ng mga people o kining within position like kapitan, mayor, especially the president to control people. Different types, power and powerful people. Power over, power with, power to, power within. Power over is how power is most commonly understood. This type of power is built on force, coercion, domination, and control, and motivates largely through fear. This form of power is built on a belief that power is a finite resource that can be held by individuals, and that some people power and some people do not have. Power with. Power with is a shared power that grows out of collaboration and relationships. It is built on respect, mutual support, shared powers, solidarity, influence, empowerment, and collaborative decision-making. Power with is linked to social power, the influence we wield among equals. Power with can help build bridges within groups. Examples are families, organizations, social change movements, or across differences, gender, culture, class. Rather than domination and control, power with the leads to collective action and ability to act together. Power 2. Power 2 refers to the productive or generative potential of power and the new possibilities or actions that can be created without using relationships of domination. It is built on the unique potential of every person to shape his or her life and world. It is the power to make difference, to create something new, or to achieve goals. Power within. Power within is related to a person's sense of self-worth and self-knowledge. It includes an ability to recognize individuals' differences while respecting others. Power within involves people having a sense of their own capacity and self-worth. Power with allows people to recognize their power too, and power with and believe they can make a difference. Use of force or violence. Experience shows that the dividing line between force and violence is always difficult to define in the fog of battle, a fog made even denser by terrorism. Each side denounces the other as the perpetrator of violence, which could make us believe that assessment of violence are contingent and relative. Yet, we have an impression that there is indeed a dividing line between the two. Force is acceptable and violence is not. Violence is an endemic evil that feeds on human misery and the misery of the world. It is an abuse that causes death and destruction. While there is no simple determinism, no easily identifiable profile of violent person. Despair and violence do often go together. Being violent may be a way to exist. Violence is often a means of expression for the desperate, the exclusive and starving, the humiliated, whether real or perceived. It is blind, it is unleashed without control and does not only harm those against whom it is target. It is all the more terrible in that it feeds on itself. Violence breeds violence. Acts of gender-based violence in relation to consent. Acts of gender-based violence in relation to consent. Consent requires knowing, voluntary and clear permission by word or action to engage in mutually agreed upon sexual activity. Each party has the responsibility to make that the other has consented before engaging in the activity. For consent to be valid, there must be, at the time of the act of sexual intercourse or sexual contact, actual words or conduct indicating freely given agreement to have a sexual intercourse or sexual contact. A person may be incapable of giving consent by reason of age, threat or intimidation, lack of opportunity to object, disability, drug or alcohol consumption, or other cause. Cycle of violence. Understanding the cycle of violence is crucial in stopping relationship violence as well as in answering the most common question regarding battering. 3 stages of cycle of violence. First is the tension building phase. In this phase, the batterer gets edgy and tension begins to build up. This is where the battered person may feel like they are walking on eggshells. Second is the actual explosion phase where the physical abuse occurs. It can last from few minutes to several hours. Third is the honeymoon phase. The perpetrator may be sorry or act like nothing happened, but is still interested in making up and may even promise never to do it again. However, the tension almost always starts to build again, thus continuing the cycle. So that's all for our report.